Hi everyone! Today I want to share with you what seeds should be directly sown into the garden versus those that we want to start inside under lights. And maybe a more appropriate way to title this is how to know if a seed should be directly sown into the garden. That's the way I'm always thinking about seeds. What does this particular seed need in order to germinate and thrive? And every seed is different. And don't feel overwhelmed that it's a lot of information to digest. It is a lot of information, but once you learn it and you do it season after season, it really just becomes a part of who you are as a grower. So the first thing I'm going to think about when deciding whether a seed should be directly sown or not is, does that seed require a period of cold stratification in order to germinate? And that word only means that a seed needs a period of cold and wet in order to germinate. So something like Larkspur or Bells of Ireland, which are both hardy annuals and have quite a thick seed coat when you look at them, they need cold stratification in order to not only survive, but in order to germinate, survive, and then thrive in the garden. And so it's really always best, if you can, to direct sow those type of seeds. And you'll really see such a huge difference between a direct seeded bed of Larkspur or Bells of Ireland versus those that were started in trays and then planted out. Or even when I worked at other gardens, I was having to buy from garden centers things like Larkspur. There's no comparison. The quality is just not there. You don't even get a usable cut off something grown at a nursery. So go ahead and direct sow things that need cold stratification. Another thing to think about is, does the seed germinate so easily, so readily, and take off so quickly that it's basically of no sense to put it under lights? So some examples would be Bachelor's buttons and Love in a Mist for hardy annuals, or maybe something like Tithonia come summer when we're talking about tender annuals. I'm never going to put those things under light. They really just aren't going to earn their keep under the lighting system. You can just direct sow those things into the garden. They take off quickly and easily, and that makes them a good candidate for direct sowing. So if they grow quickly and easily when direct sown, why not direct sow them? Another thing to think about, which is somewhat similar, is some seeds actually prefer to be direct sown. And an example of this would be poppies, whether that be a Shirley poppy, a bread seed poppy, or a peony type poppy, which I absolutely adore those. They actually prefer to be planted out into the garden, and you just really have to sprinkle them on the soil surface, give them a very light watering, and they will take off. And it's not to say that you can't start poppies inside. There was a year when I actually did try that, but it was really of no use at all. The ones in the garden always outperformed those started under lights. Now, another thing to think about, which I think is really valuable, is, can you get high quantities of the seed for a relatively inexpensive price? And this is definitely going to vary from seed to seed and from variety to variety. So let me give you a for instance. Everybody loves to grow zinnias, right? I love to grow envy zinnias, and I can get a lot of envy zinnia seeds for a very inexpensive price. And they check off something else from my list. They germinate very quickly and easily when direct sown in the garden. So I'm going to direct sow envy zinnias. I'm not going to give them any space under my valuable lighting system. However, say there is a new zinnia on the market. So for this year, Floret introduced the Little Flower Girl zinnia, and I purchased one packet. I am certainly going to put those guys under lights. I paid a lot of money for the seed. I didn't get a lot of the seed, and I want to get really good germination. So I'm going to start that particular variety under lights because it was so expensive per seed. So I hope that's helpful and makes sense, because it's really important to anticipate a pretty serious amount of loss when you're direct seeding. I anticipate about a 30 to 40% loss of seed if I direct sow something, because there's a lot of things that can happen. Plants can overcrowd each other, seed can be blown away, animals can disturb the seed. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. And so if I'm dealing with a seed that is more valuable, I generally do put that seed under lights. The last thing to think about is something that we just all have to answer for ourselves, and it's just to think about what are your particular pests in your garden or farm. So for instance, I have a lot of bunnies here, and even with my 3 cats and my Labrador, we still have a lot of bunnies for some reason. And so I really have to anticipate the destruction that they're going to do and do everything I can to combat that destruction. So for instance, you might see on a lot of lists that sunflowers should be direct sown. And if you don't have any bunny pressure, or if you don't have any deer pressure, that might be a good idea to direct sow sunflowers. But I don't do it because I know that if I direct sow my sunflowers, the second those guys pop out of the ground and get those first sets of true leaves, the bunnies are going to come through and completely decimate the row. I've had it happen over and over and over again, and finally I just said, okay, I have to do something different. And so now I start sunflowers under lights, and I have them going under lights about 14 days before I then plant them out. Which at that point, once they're planted out, they're covered with bird netting, which is weighed down by bricks, until the plants get to be about 1 to 1.5 feet tall, and at that point I uncover them. Usually the bunnies don't bother them at that height. But you see, you really have to say what are the pests that I have, and therefore what is best to direct sow for me based on those pests, and only you can answer that question. So now that we've talked about how do we decide whether a seed should be direct sown versus started under lights, let's talk about something that's really important, and that's how to have success when direct sowing. So when you're going out there with your seeds, you're ready to direct sow a bed and you're so excited, make sure you take the time to properly prepare the bed before planting in it. So you really want to think about 4 things here, I think. You want to think about removing any and all weeds from the planting area. No matter how long it takes, this is really important. Those weeds will quickly take over an entire bed, and your seeds will fail based on the fact that they're being choked out by weeds. The second thing is that you want to go ahead and prepare the soil. You know, you don't just want to direct seed a bed that has hard compacted soil that you haven't taken the time to work the soil. You really want that nice, loamy, crumbly soil so that when your seeds start to germinate, they just have the easiest time sprouting through that soil. So take time, amend the soil, work the soil, get it to the right consistency so that germination is easy on your seeds. The third thing is to think about what seeds you're planting and make sure to plant it at the right depth. You know, some seeds don't even want to be buried at all and actually need light to germinate, whereas some seeds want to be planted at 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, 1/2, 1 inch. Each seed is different, and so just do a little research, find out what that seed needs, and make sure you plant it at the right depth, and make sure you take into consideration, does it need light to germinate or does it need darkness to germinate? And the last thing to having success is to make sure to keep the seed bed evenly moist. And this is absolutely vital. Some seeds can take 21 days to germinate. That's a long time, and we have to keep the seed bed evenly moist that entire time. So whether you run irrigation lines, whether you water by hose or by hand, the point is, however you do it, just do it and keep the bed evenly moist. And if you do all those things, you should have great success with direct sowing seeds. Well guys, I think that brings me to the conclusion of this video. As I said in the description section, I'll put a list of everything that I prefer to direct sow. But please, please take that information with a grain of salt. That is what works for me in this zone on this land. And there is no replacement for experience. Experience is the best teacher out there, and also experimentation, you know, to see just what works for you and your land. And I think a lot of people want and look for lists. They want a list. They want to see direct sow these seeds. but it's just not as cut and dry as that. I mean, take for instance even my zinnia example. If I were to just make a list and say, you know, here's some seeds that we should direct sow. Tithonia, Nigella, zinnia, sunflower, larkspur. There's so much information missing from that list that's why I don't really want to put a list like that out there. There's just so much more to learn and know. Just learn, you know, each flower. What does each seed need? And don't get overwhelmed by that. Enjoy the process. It's a wonderful process to learn each seed, each flower, and what it needs. So guys, I hope this has been helpful. I hope, you know, even though I didn't give you that list, that it at least gives you the tools to figure out whether or not you might want to try direct sowing a seed. You know, does it need cold stratification? Does it prefer to be direct sown? Does it easily and quickly germinate in the garden without any problems? Do you have any pest issues that you might want to think about? And is the seed affordable? Those are all things that I consider when I'm thinking about direct sowing versus under lights. So guys, I want to wish you a wonderful day, and until next time, happy gardening. Bye!